welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today. And if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there on your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend because, hey, it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going.
All right, well, kicking things off, a reminder that today's topic is improving security, usability, and compliance with a data governance framework. And this will be such an interesting conversation today because for a lot of teams out there, sure, we know how important it is to collect, maintain, and store our data. But if we're being honest, our governance frameworks might be a little loose, maybe a little unclear, and no judgment. It is very easy to let these policies slide or collect dust. It is easy to assume that we are following our organization's privacy policies, so that's all we need to do, right? We're all set. But these may not be true statements. And the downside to ignoring these concerns could be big. So today, we're going to set a foundation to get your data secure, protected, and under control, to start thinking about those best ways to clear up and solidify those oh so important policies and be sure that they're lined up with compliance regulations. That is a lot. It's a big day, but luckily, we are going to explore all of this today with some expert guidance from the awesome folks at Anaconda, who will walk us through how to craft and implement a strategic governance program that will not only work, but streamline your organization's data management, security, and utilization. I cannot wait to learn more, so let's get things rolling. All right, now I'm going to pause very quickly to reintroduce myself if you missed it at the top. Again, my name is Jess Steinbach. I am a moderator here at Actual Tech Media, and my friends and fellow moderators, the full crew you can see up on our screen here, David Davis, Scott Becker, and Keith Ward will be joining us on live chat, and we'll be chatting with Scott Becker in just a moment here for our keynote. But I mentioned a bit earlier prizes, and I'm sure that rang in some of your ears, so let's come back to that very quickly. Today on the EcoCast, you could win one of three $300 Amazon gift cards, so stay tuned for that. Plus, don't forget about that best question gift card. So get those questions in during our live chat with the Anaconda crew in just a moment here. But we are going to get things rolling pretty quickly this morning and kick things off with our awesome keynote here. I'm going to bring out the one and only Scott Becker, who is joined by data expert and all-around fascinating human, and that is Philip Russum, consultant and analyst for data management and analytics. Scott and Philip have invited us to sit in on a conversation with them all about the realities of data governance. That's the risks, the opportunities, and of course, those all-important best practices. This is going to be such an interesting discussion. I can't wait to dive in. So I'm going to hand things right on over to Scott to lead us through. Take it away, Scott.
Thanks, Philip, for being here. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and always good to see you, Scott.
Likewise. Well, let's get straight into it. So I hear a lot of urgency around the need for data governance in most companies and other organizations. Is this just a scare tactic, or is it a real thing?
It's a real thing. I think some people perceive it as a scare tactic because we often talk about the pretty big problems that data governance can help you to avoid. For example, a lot of the problems have to do with business compliance, especially to governmentally mandated regulations. So as a point of regulatory compliance, there's some things if you do wrongly, like if data is misused in certain ways, your company can be fined. And, this varies from country to country. Our fines are not that common or that high in the United States here. But fines in the European Union are actually quite high and much more common. So depending on where you are, if you misuse, especially tightly governed data such as customer data and partner data, any kind of party data that's about actual human beings, like residents in the European Union, et cetera, if you misuse that, then it does get scary in terms of the fines that corporations and also individual executives can be hit with. So that's part of the scare tactic. But, it's a real thing because it helps you to just be a better and more responsible citizen when it comes to handling data. For example, here in the United States, we do have some mandated guidelines to go to, especially through the HIPAA Act, that help us to deal with how we handle data privacy. So if you have a data governance program, it helps you to comply with your own data privacy policy, right? Again, we have some guidelines, but it's up to your company to create the privacy policy, right? And so if you misuse the privacy policy, you're going to make a lot of customers angry, as well as larger communities that can lead to brand tarnish and things of that problem.
So you're an expert in most forms of data management, ranging from data warehousing and data lakes to data is used in data science and advanced analytics. So how are practical solutions in these and other data management disciplines affected by data governance?
That's a great question. First of all, yes, certain solutions that you want to build for data management must take into account pre-existing data governance policies, rules about how data can and cannot be used. You need to take those in mind as you design and build any kind of data-driven solution. And then sometimes as you build a new solution, you may realize, well, we've never handled this particular domain of data before. Like we've handled a lot of customer data and partner data. We haven't handled a lot of product data before. This is kind of new to us. Or we haven't handled employee data. Those are quite often new. So you may have to create new data governance policies to set up some rules about what individual users, what use cases, what departments have a right to access this data, and in what use cases can they do that. So governance has to be part of any consideration when you design new data management solutions or update older ones. Also, let's get real specific here. For example, one thing that comes to mind is there's some data management solutions that involve a lot of change. So when you have a lot of change management associated with the initiation of a new data management policy, then it's good to have the data governance board. There are people serving on committees, steering committees, boards, that sort of thing. And that's how, people and process is brought together in data governance. So you want to be sure that those people are involved just to help users and people across your organization understand what are the changes to data and so forth. Data quality programs tend to make a lot of changes to the data itself to improve the state of data. But a lot of data quality problems have to do with how data gets entered. So you might have new governance policies about how data entry and so forth goes. Also, master data management, if you're doing it very deeply, will involve changes to a variety of systems, even operational applications that you as a data person may not have a lot of control over. So those have so when you have a lot of change management that's going to come to pass, the governance committee can help the larger organization understand what the changes are and so forth. Also, one little red flag I want to put up with is a lot of data management professionals are increasingly asked to supply data for self-service access to data. And self-service practices like data exploration and some self-service analytics, self-service data prep, et cetera. Self-service can be an invitation to a data governance infraction. So if you're a data person working on a new self-service solution, you got to make sure that the self-service solution is going to respect things like your privacy policy, external things like the HIPAA Act that I mentioned earlier, and so forth.
No, that's a great point about self-service. That's really interesting. So you once called data governance schizophrenic because of its two halves. So what are the two halves and how do you balance them?
Yeah. A lot of times people, you say data governance to people and they go, oh yeah, it has a definite business compliance function. And that's why we do data governance in my company. And in fact, a lot of companies begin with their data governance policies because they're driven by the need to comply, especially with external regulations and also internal ones for your data privacy policies. But that's only half of governance. We see a lot of organizations as they mature, into data governance, they tend to broaden it out sideways. And as they broaden out, it's more than business compliance. It also tends to address a wide range of data standards. For example, we mentioned data quality a minute ago. With the data quality program, how do you even know if the state of your data meets acceptable parameters? Well, the acceptable parameters are typically defined by certain data quality metrics. And these metrics become a standard for figuring out, are we meeting our standard in terms of the quality of data, and so forth. So you can have other standards that the data governance team tends to put out there as guidelines for a wide range of developers to follow. So a lot of times you'll have data governance policies that will explain what are our preferred methods for modeling data, what are our preferred methods for documenting metadata, what are our preferred interfaces for certain types of data management solutions, what kind of technologies do we prefer to use, because we know that those are going to be able to deploy broadly across our enterprise given our current state of technology. So you get the idea. It is kind of schizophrenic. So it's more than the half we always think of, which is business compliance. There's also technology standards for the quality of data and its accessibility.
Thanks for spelling that out. I love that idea of being schizophrenic. So I've heard you and other people talk about how controlling access to data is one of the priorities of a data governance program. Yet you also say that making broad enterprise data more accessible to more user types is also a priority. And this almost sounds a little bit like what you mentioned with the self-services as well. Don't those two sort of cancel each other out?
Yeah. It's yet another dichotomy, yet another irony of data governance. Again, we kind of have knee-jerk reactions. Someone says data governance, and you think about, oh yeah, that's controlling data for the purposes of business compliance, or controlling data and its access for the purposes of technology standards. And that's all true. But we also have data governance standards, especially the technology standards. We have data quality policies. Let me say that again. We have data governance policies that actually set up a context for more people to access more data. And in fact, if you don't set up controls for how data is accessed, you typically don't even open that data up for access. See what I'm saying? So without data governance, there is typically control in the sense of we just lock the data down and no one's sharing it. And that's terrible, because we know from sharing data broadly, more people get a better understanding, especially of highly data described entities like the customer. Your partners and products have a lot of descriptions in data that can be useful to a wide variety of functions, from sales and marketing all the way through service and call center, and even into the world of strategic decision making, which a lot of executives do through analytics. So again, if we don't have trusted controls over data, and we don't have trusted standards to help us to improve data, then organizations tend to lock down the data, and it's not being used, it's not being shared, so we're not getting business value from it without data governance.
Yeah, and let's move on to one other dichotomy maybe of data governance. So users describe it as all about people and process, while some vendors claim to have tools for data governance. So which is it? Or is it a bit of both?
Yeah, again, when we hear the term data governance, one of the things we may think, at kind of the second or third tier is, there is a people and process organization. For example, you might have a group of people who are in some kind of committee, steering committee. A lot of organizations call them data governance boards. And these, whatever this people structure is, this team structure, whatever you want to call it, it will have a mix of people, because you have to have business people there so that they can do two things. The business people are there to describe what they need from governance. They also describe what they need from data, and then think about what kind of governance do we put in place as we create new implementations for new use cases for data. But you also need the technology people who can explain, well, here's the data that's available today. sometimes you have to turn to third parties and buy extra data, especially about your customers and partners. And there is a lot of trustable data you can acquire and so forth. So you need people just having these conversations. What are we trying to do? What are the business goals? What data do we have? And what data management technologies do we have in place that we could use today? So a lot of people, a lot of discussions, and a lot of committee meetings. And that's one of the things people sort of fear about data governance. It does have its own sort of bureaucratic side to it. But also, if you think about just the examples I gave you, you really need tool automation so that those groups of people can operate faster, more accurately, and can collaborate more broadly. For example, a lot of times these data governance committees, they'll use technologies that really weren't built for data. For example, a lot of organizations will have content management systems, especially they'll have enterprise portal technologies that they've been using to share lots of documents and information. Today, they're probably sharing some data sets and data products through their content management and portal technologies. So a lot of times that the data governance committee will use that as ways of sort of sharing information as they collaborate to create new policies. But they will also then use the automation of those kind of platforms to publish policies so that people can go there, read them, and understand what the current policy for certain types of data access, what the policies are for like self-service we mentioned, and so forth. There's also kind of this third dimension where at some point it's time-consuming for people if they have to oversee how data gets used in data management solutions to be sure that governance policies are being complied with. And so more and more we see vendor tools that help us with the collaboration, the publication of policies I talked about. We're now seeing a kind of new automation for data governance that really watches how we use data. And so we'll monitor systems to see what very specific users are hitting what specific data, as well as compiling that into more general information like what departments, what business units are hitting what domains of data and so forth. And you can look at information that's gathered by system monitoring equipment, a lot of it built nowadays specifically for governance policies. And so we're seeing more automation of the policing side of governance that's really helpful. And if you can imagine what humans will have to do, it would be really so time consuming as to keep them from even doing that kind of monitoring. So you get the idea. We've got all kinds of tool automation from a wide variety of vendors and technologies that are helping us to automate this very people-laden process of data governance.
Okay. Well, Philip, I think we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks so much for coming on. You always bring such great information and so many insights to these data and analytics discussions. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, good talking to you, Scott. See you.
Bye.
Oh man, I love that Philip's last point about just the cross section between sort of people and policies and tools, and that is, I know sometimes data governance can sound a little dry, but how interesting is that, right? It's all of these different things in one go. So not getting caught up in maybe the legalese, which is a little dry, and thinking about the strategy and the approaches behind it is a pretty interesting little puzzle work that we're getting to play with today, and I'm excited to dive into that in just a moment. But before we do, I do want to point out that on the screen here, we've got a quick poll question for you all. And what we're wondering is, what is your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? Obviously, today we're talking about data governance strategies. So when you think about this, is this an urgent problem? Have you realized that this is something that needs to be fixed, yesterday, and you have to jump into it right away? Or are you actually in more of that kind of thinking ahead? It's not maybe as you're okay right now, but you need to tighten some things up or enhance or revisit. So you're sort of thinking ahead. And again, no judgment, no shade here. We're not going to publish your names next to any of this. We're just kind of curious, and it helps our expert here today get an idea for where you're all at in your planning phase. So thank you to everyone who's answering that. Speaking of our incredible expert speaker, let's move things along and get this day started, because I am so excited to jump in now. And I'm going to bring out Hassam here with us. Just one moment. All right. So Hassam Mian, sales engineer at Anaconda, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I am so excited to hear what you have in store for us. I know we want to save some time for questions. So Hassam, I'm going to kick things on over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
All right. We can hear you loud and clear. Take it away, my friend.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Very, very happy to be here. Thought I'd do a little introduction to myself. I'm a sales engineer here at Anaconda. I've been so for a couple of years now. And really the main takeaway with that is I've been able to work with organizations of all sizes, teams as small as 5 to teams as large as 10,000 developers using Python within the organization. So I've seen use cases at quite a mix of different size companies and different requirements. So happy to kind of share maybe some learnings today and, at least some initial steps, right, to protect yourselves, which is really kind of the focus of today's conversation. So we're obviously going to talk about improving security, right, in the data governance space. But really the spin that we're going to take on it is obviously when that data is in action, right, when Python is being applied against that data. What items from a governance perspective can you implement to protect yourselves? So with that, today's conversation, I just wanted to perhaps introduce a few topics before we talk about, the root of the problem, being obviously exploited data. So we'll talk about open source today, some trends that we're seeing, and then also start to talk a little bit about some security trends that we're seeing, right? Open source is rising, but, so are some concerns. And then we'll kind of marry that to exactly how that comes to be in a visual example. We'll actually showcase very simply how a system often gets corrupted, the root of that problem, and then some best practices of some initial items that you can adopt in a framework to get started, and kind of what those frameworks might look like. And then we'll open it up for any questions as you see fit. So please, in the meantime, if there's any questions that you have, definitely do pop them into the chat. Cool. So I see we have an attendee list of a few different companies, actually quite a mix. And so it'll be interesting to see how everyone falls into this bucket. But from a general's perspective, right, what we see at Anaconda is oftentimes when folks need to get started with Python and R, sometimes there's a central place, but oftentimes, they often just hit out to the internet, install Python wherever they can get it, install R wherever they can get it, download it to their handy dandy laptops, right, that we all carry around, and go on our way and start delivering value to the organization, knowing or unknowingly, right, to them, about how we get to those results, but delivering value, right? Whether that's ETL work, whether that's automating some job, whether that's, creating some script to generate, a nifty dashboard, right? And so many times this is often happening with limited visibility, limited oversight by the organization. When you're on the laptop, right, it's really hard for the organization to see exactly what the user is doing, right? What data, what processes, what kind of code are they writing, what packages are they using, and this, becomes a really, really muddy, right, water situation, especially so when folks are downloading packages from multiple package repositories from the web, right? And so we'll talk a little bit more about this in a few slides, but a key takeaway is, sure, right, it's a little bit confusing of how to get Python and R, but it's obviously happening, and it's happening with quite a large rise. And what we're seeing in the ecosystem is this huge rise in package downloads. And again, this is actually, outdated. We're seeing package downloads start to reach 8 billion packages a year. So the usage of open source is increasing, which is great. It's obviously delivering a lot of value inside of organizations. But there's obviously, some concerns that come with it. And so I'm sure we don't have to spend too much time on this topic. I'm sure, folks have heard about attacks and vulnerabilities, obviously leaving, mayhem and significant issues behind. One article that I'd actually like to point out of these is that top left one, that dependency confusion. It's a great article on Medium. I highly suggest you read it if this is a topic you're interested in. But I actually think it's really relevant to today's topic. And specifically, a security researcher was able to mimic certain Python packages. And as they were downloaded in, large organizations like those, the names and logos there, information was actually sent back to the security researcher. So as these Python packages were installed, right, information was sent back. And the information that was sent back was predominantly user information and machine information, right? Obviously, he's a security researcher, and this was an exercise, right? But that's just one tiny step, that's just a couple lines of code, right, that he could have implemented to also, aggregate any other information from that machine, whether that was data or code, okay? So it's an interesting article. I would definitely recommend you read that one. And obviously, this doesn't need any major introduction, right? Especially at a kind of national level, right? Even there's a recent cybersecurity executive order that's been signed, and I believe there's additional ones coming or amendments to it as well. But essentially saying that, hey, in this day and age, right, for technological items, we really do need to start to pay attention to the technological components that build it. And so there's been all sorts of requirements that have been being pushed recently. We're doing a lot on the Anaconda side to abide and make sure that all of the requirements are met. And so organizations are often having to think about this item and having to start to think about adopting, right, those same requirements as they heavily depend on technology. And so really, let's kind of get back to the topic, right? The topic is security, data governance. And so let's kind of walk through an example of what it looks like inside of an organization, right? When we seemingly are just doing Python work, right? What actually happens? And so at the very bottom, right, we have these individual workstations. There's a cloud database or a number of databases within a network that users are pulling right onto their machines or onto their instances, right? And from here, they're developing, and oftentimes they have to pull packages. And so they're reaching out to maybe something like the Anaconda repository. Maybe they're reaching out to other public package repos like PyPI, or they're reaching out to GitHub, right, or other internet sources, or wherever their package lives, right, whatever link they can get it from. And so what ends up happening is as these packages are being downloaded, right, some of these naturally contain vulnerabilities that pop up after a developer has published them, or some of these actually have been hard-coded with vulnerabilities in mind, right, because they're just from this third-party community, or there's actually a bad actor out there with malicious intent. And obviously, right, that clearly is the case with the number of attacks that we're seeing out in the ecosystem. And so very quickly, these silos or these machines and these environments get corrupted. They get corrupted because the packages have been installed there and that data is residing there, right? And so just like that security researchers exercise, we're just one step away from having that data potentially be sent out, right? Or potentially be exploited or manipulated with. And so obviously those lines turned red and those silos turned red, right? But I also wanted to give a little bit of color as to kind of why they turn red, right? And this is just what a Python environment inside of a laptop looks like, right? NumPy depends on this package, which depends on this package, which depends on this very specific version of a package, right? Which is exactly why we call this a dependency tree. And so what we're seeing is just for one environment on a machine, right? This could be your basic ETL environment, right? Where you're doing basic data prep, right? With NumPy, Pandas, maybe some other packages here. And so in this singular environment, it often depends on tens or hundreds of other packages, right? That we see in this visual. And often what happens is as these packages are being pulled or called upon, right, they're pulling in other packages or very specific version of packages, and they contain vulnerabilities, right? Now, with malicious intent or otherwise, right, regardless, they have, exploits that exist with them that can be taken advantage of, right? So when this is on the machine, right next to the data, right, in a pandas data frame, right, this all of a sudden starts to become a big data governance issue, right? And many organizations actually limit the usage of Python, even though it brings so much value, because of this risk. And this is actually not something that we see as a small issue. This is something that we're seeing as, becoming larger by the day. In fact, we're roughly seeing 50 new CVEs being added into this ecosystem, right? And so, again, to recap this use case, right, we have this huge rise of open source. There's definitely no stopping it, right? People are depending on Python and R more than ever. There's more value being driven by those technologies than ever. There's also this rise of cyber attacks, right, that are often happening by these vulnerable packages. And when users are simply developing on the desktop and the data is residing right next to it, right, this naturally becomes a very, very sticky situation, right? And so it's with this backdrop that we want to introduce essentially what we are adopting as this framework that many organizations are adopting as well. And so it's really a two-punch problem, or a two-punch combo that we have to attack this problem with. And so that first one is obviously, okay, right, we have desktop development and the data right there. And then the other is this notion of vulnerable packages, right? And as we think about improving security and data governance, right, as data is being used in some Python script or some workflow, right, we really do need to protect that as well. And so the framework that Anaconda believes in is this notion of first, centralize the development, right? Centralizes the development in an enterprise fashion in a way that the enterprise can actually own, administrate, and have quick access to what's being done with their data. And the second is focus on the build components, right? Focus on the packages or the components used against that data. And for Python, right, the packages and the environment is a significant part of that. And finally, when you marry these two items together, because you have it in a central place and you have additional telemetry on the build components, you can really, ongoing administrate and monitor this situation. And always stay on top of, Python security in relation to how data is being used for any analysis, prep, or scripting purposes. And so it's really kind of these three major pillars, but it really comes from marrying the first two together, right? Centralizing your development and focusing on the build artifacts. And so we use this visual to kind of explain what the sticky situation is like, right? Well, if we were to adopt essentially those two pieces of advice right there, centralizing development and focusing on the build components, we effectively, right, get a system like this, where instead of users reaching directly out and pulling the items they need, we're centralizing them, and we're doing so with additional information, telemetry, insight to ensure with confidence that, yes, these are the components that should be used against my data. And then the second item is getting those users off of the desktop, putting them in a central place where your cloud databases aren't going to, a million different places if they don't have to, right? They're going to a central development platform, something that your admins can easily monitor, right? Who's logging in, right? What's going on? And by marrying these two together, right, you have ongoing visibility into your data in use from a Python perspective, while also ensuring that from a security and confidence perspective, right, anything that they have access to install has already passed, a vetting process. And so while simplistic, right, this may seem at face value, there's a lot of value here in just doing these first two steps, right? And what we've seen is many organizations are actually struggling to adopt these two steps. And so I want to give you additional color as to kind of, okay, right, these are the two steps, but kind of, the reason why behind it. And so first, let's focus on the build artifacts, right? Obviously, National Vulnerability Database, I'm sure folks are familiar with, but if not, the National Vulnerability Database is a government agency. It's a aggregated database, right, that's provided by this government agency, in which they aggregate all types of CVEs, which stand for common vulnerabilities or exploits. Right? These are potential ways to exploit a piece of technology, right, and gain access to the system or be able to do things beyond its initial means or intent. And so what we do here at Anaconda is, like many organizations, right, accept that information and pull that information in, right? And a lot of scanners in this ecosystem will do this matching, which is a great start. However, anyone can report a CVE, anyone can report versions of a CVE, and all of that information is aggregated up into a claim, right? And this matching are just claims. And so when you focus on the build artifacts, what Anaconda is doing from our side is all of those packages that we make available, right? Those packages are actually reviewed for vulnerability information. And not just those packages, but the builds, Windows, Mac, Linux, NoArch, the versions of Python, the versions of that package. And so all of that information is reviewed in association with whatever pieces of information have been submitted to make that vulnerability claim. And based on that, Anaconda, the same people that are building the packages, are the same people are actually reviewing this information and refining that data. And really kind of what that means to organizations, right, is instead of just simply saying, hey, this could be risky with a reported flag, Anaconda is actually stepping in and saying, hey, this item, this package actually does have vulnerabilities, right? So this is probably something you don't want to put inside of your framework. This is something you don't want to make available, right, to your Python user base as it relates to interacting with data / development. And on the flip side of that, there are actually situations where publicly something might look risky, but in fact, after further due diligence, we find that it's totally okay. It's totally okay because either the claim to begin with was false, or because that package has actually been fixed through some sort of bug fix or code patch that we've applied. And so really an example to an end organization is this very quick and clear visibility as to what package is affected, what the status is from Anaconda, what versions and what builds are affected, right? So that as my users are, depending on Python more and using it more with data, right, I'm only promoting things that are actually cleared or mitigated. I'm not promoting build components that actually have vulnerabilities, right? So I'm stopping it from entering the pipeline to begin with. And so that's definitely, one of the major pillars is focusing on the build artifacts. And this is just a quick example of how you as an organization can quickly identify which build artifacts you should or should not be using, right, within an organization. And a quick comment I'd like to make here is, like I said, a lot of organizations might provide scanning services on Python specifically, right? But these packages aren't just Python bits, especially Conda. And so there's lots of other bits and components that go into the Conda package, not just the Python bits. A lot of the other scanners in the ecosystem will just do the Python bits. But we tend to do so much more. And if there's essentially a conversation you'd like to have around that, I'm more than happy to have that. So feel free to follow up with us or shoot us an email. So focusing on the build artifacts, right? That's definitely one item. The other item is this notion of centralizing development. And this doesn't have to be, the item that is the way you centralize development. This is just a best practice that we've seen at Anaconda. Okay, centralizing your development can easily be, a lightweight notebook server, some sort of server that you implement of your own, right? What we're showcasing here is best practices around what we've seen organizations adopt. And what we've seen organizations adopt is getting off of the desktop entirely. And so instead of developing on the desktop, installing packages on the desktop, and having the code live on the desktop, they actually like to use their workstation through a web browser. And through that web browser, they can authenticate into an enterprise server. And upon this enterprise server, they can quickly access, their notebook tools, their development tools. Very popular ones that we provide are Jupyter Notebook, Jupyter Lab, Zeppelin, RStudio, VS Code in the browser. Easy access to those projects via backend Git integration, and being able to actually develop and collaborate with one another through the browser or through some sort of central server without having to work locally, while also pulling packages right from that secure methodology we just described. And so as we're collaborating, as we're adding packages, as we're building new features and new pieces of code, whenever we're done, right, we can deploy that item. And so it really is up to you as an organization where you see yourself. Or do you see yourself more of just providing an area where people can develop and collaborate and pull those secure build components, right? Or are you an organization that essentially not only needs to do that, but also needs to create deployments, right? Where you actually deploy these machine learning models, dashboards, web applications, REST APIs, things of that nature. So that really is, at the end of the day, just a you decision at an organization layer. But regardless, right, this still holds true, which is, let me go back a couple slides. Right, is this marriage of vetting build artifacts from a top-end perspective, and then providing a central place where those users can then access those artifacts and use it in association with their data. And so whether that's something that you implement independently, or whether that's something like adopting, a platform approach that we've seen work really well at Anaconda. And so these are just some of the items and takeaways I wanted to kind of bring up for the team here. And so thank you so much. Hopefully this was helpful. I definitely think that we do need to start talking more about Python usage as it relates to data and data governance. I think data governance has historically been a data management, data warehousing item, but it definitely starts to spill into the topic of how do I protect my data when I'm using it, right? And Python is a big application in that space. So thank you so much, team. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, let's get into some questions. Hassam, thank you so much for that awesome presentation. That was so interesting. I do want to point out to everyone out there in the audience that we have a poll up on the screen for you. And what we are wondering is what additional information you would like to get about the Anaconda solution. So we just got some incredible info from Hassam. Obviously, this is just kind of scratching the surface. We're just getting started on this. And there's so much more to dig into. So if you would like to get a little bit more information, this is that way that you can sort of, as I always say, this is hitting the easy button, right? This is making your future life a little easier. By clicking on this poll, Anaconda is going to hand you exactly the follow-up that you want for wherever you're at in your specific research journey and exploration right now. So click on that poll. Your future self will thank you. While you're doing that, Hassam and I are going to dig into some of these questions. You ready for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's do it. I'm going to start with this one. Hassam, can you explain a little bit more? We have a question here about the infrastructure. So what infrastructure are your offerings running on?
Yeah, it really depends. But I mean, from a basic perspective, a Linux server, if packages and build artifacts are a focus of yours, you can simply deploy that on a Linux server today. Now that platform item, that's going to be a little bit heavier. That might be something where Kubernetes makes the most sense. But in both situations, if you don't want to manage the infrastructure or provide the infrastructure, we can take care of that for you. So totally not a problem.
A little bit of a follow-up to that. If somebody can't host it, what are their options for them?
Yeah, honestly, just kind of reach out to us on Anaconda side. You'll probably interact with someone like myself. But we can absolutely totally host it. And then so at that point, you as an organization, you would simply just consume a URL You wouldn't necessarily have to, manage any Linux or pieces of infrastructure, any servers or anything like that.
Okay. How does this compare to existing scanning that we do today? Good question.
Yeah, so this is definitely where, if this is maybe the question that you asked, or if you're interested in this, definitely would encourage you to set up a session with us where we can dive into more specifics. But we've actually done an analysis with very, common scanning tools out there in the ecosystem. And this analysis shows that on the Python components, as it relates to the Python packages, there's telemetry and scanning that they're doing there. But as far as any language binary or lower OS binaries that are included into the package, which are very common, those are actually items that they don't scan for at all. And so we have all types of commentary, curation comments, and rationale as to how we came to something. And that's all detail I'm more than happy to provide on a follow-up.
Okay. We have a question here from somebody who says that they're predominantly using pip and wondering what additional value they might get if they moved over to or were working with Anaconda.
Yeah, listen, pip is obviously, very valuable. There's tons of projects out there. Conda likes to focus on the most popular, right? So, those one-offs you may not find in the Conda ecosystem, but things to be wary about in the pip ecosystem is anyone can publish, right? So anyone can simply build a package, publish it, upload it. Any one of your users can simply consume it. And so this starts to become really hairy when you essentially have third-party or malicious actors simply uploading to a public repo. And that's where common attacks like typo squatting or dependency confusion come into play. And so public repos are often targeted by these attacks. And so that's one thing that often happens with pip. And then another aspect on pip is often when you need support, you have to simply go to the community, right? Obviously, we're an enterprise company, Anaconda. We're also an open source company with and essentially have an enterprise division, right? And this enterprise division essentially has been stood up to ensure that, if there are any issues with packages, builds, any Python needs of yours, right, that we can support you from an enterprise perspective as well. So just things to kind of think about, right, whether at the repo layer or whether at the kind of support and services layer.
Definitely lots to think about. I want to point out that we've gotten a couple of high fives out there, and Scott just chimed in to say that he's learned a lot today. Me too, Scott. I agree. Can this support offline or air gap needs? And if so, can you tell us a little bit more about how?
Yeah, totally. This is very common. Like I said, I've dealt with lots of organizations of all sizes, many of them in the finance, healthcare, government space, and some of them highly regulatory, compliance is super serious. And so they often adopt a no network approach, meaning, hey, this system cannot reach the outside internet whatsoever, nor can my users. And so we actually support many of these types of use cases. And so you essentially stand up a private package server inside of the network, and then there's a link we give you that someone can essentially get the latest update of packages and carry that over to the offline network to update there. So if that's relevant, definitely feel free to reach out.
All right, now I'm gonna throw a bit of a curveball at you because it's not really a technical question as much, but I like this, and I'm glad that Gilbert asked this. I'm wondering, folks ask us all the time. They're struggling with that balance between, functionality and usability, and efficiency and security. So Gilbert's asking about making an informed trade-off between privacy and performance. I know this is a big question. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts you'd like to share with the audience about that.
Yeah, no, I think this is a great question. And if anything, I'd actually like to add, right? So there's privacy versus performance, but I actually think down the road, there's also a potential rework. And what I mean by that is, sure, right? Some packages may not be available. That may be an issue, right? But we're being more secure. That may have issues on performance, but at the end of the day, it really shouldn't. And it shouldn't because the system that we're promoting is promoting versions of packages, right? Not removing packages entirely, right? But promoting the good versions of a package, right? Sure, you may lose on some performance of the newest, package version that might have, some reworked feature. But the reason I wanted to add in rework down the road is if we don't think about security, what happens down the road is, sure, we use that nifty package that got us a slight performance improvement, but when it hits production, we realize it's vulnerable. And obviously we can't trust that in production. So now we and the developers have to go through another 1 month, 2 month development cycle, right? Reworking that model, reworking that project. And so sure, maybe it was a performance optimization, but practically speaking, its vulnerability causes an issue that makes us rework it anyways, right? And so the safer approach is probably the wiser approach for many of these.
That's a great answer. And thank you very much for that great question from Gilbert, as well as all our awesome questions today. I wish we could keep going because I know there's a few of these questions that we have not gotten to yet. Hassan, we're going to make sure that these get over to your team and because I'm not going to be able to leave you a lot of time to answer on live chat as we wrap up here pretty quick. But before you leave us, if someone out there is really excited and ready to jump in, you've mentioned a few things that you'd love to follow up with folks in individual conversations. What is the best way to get started with Anaconda to reach out to your team to kind of get the ball rolling?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to go to our website. We have, helper chats in the bottom. You can start to talk about your topic. That'll get filtered over to us. You can also simply reach out to us at sales@anaconda.com, or even if you'd like to reach out to myself on LinkedIn, Hassan Mian, or HMIANH Mian at anaconda.com. So more than happy to entertain anything and everything.
I love that. What a great way to wrap up a conversation. To entertain everything and anything, reach out to Hassan. Thank you so much for such an incredible presentation. This really was a fascinating conversation. I know our audience really enjoyed it. I really appreciate your time today.
Awesome. Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you so much. Hopefully folks learned a thing or two. Yeah, take care, everyone.
All right. And a big thank you to everyone who took some time to answer that poll. I'm going to leave that up just a second longer here. I also want to encourage you all to head on over to the handouts tab. Make sure that you snag the Anaconda Open Source Governance Guide, how to implement an OSS governance program, data science, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, all of the important things. It is such an interesting read. Obviously, these are all really key topics, talking about open source tools, talking about AI, ML, and the security protocols that you need to be considering in order to avoid those defects, vulnerabilities, not to mention potential licensing and intellectual property issues. So if you are itching to learn more right away, and I'm sure you all are, be sure that you've got that handout downloaded and save that to dig in a little bit further this afternoon. All right, I'll leave that poll up even longer here, just in case you haven't had a chance to answer, and I'll go ahead and give away some prizes. So we're going to give away all 3 of our $300 Amazon gift cards here in one go. So this is going to be an exciting and a big one. I hope you're all ready. Our winners are Sean Pyburn of Massachusetts, Tony Hashem of Vermont, and Kara Bosch of North Carolina. I will read that again. Sean Pyburn of Massachusetts, Tony Hashem of Vermont, and Kara Bosch of North Carolina. If you are here live and present with us at the EcoCast, you have won a $300 Amazon gift card. So stay tuned for that. We will be following up with you. Now, I do also want to remind all of you guys that there is that best question gift card that we will be giving away after we wrap. So we review all the questions asked once we finish here, and we will follow up with that best question asked card. So stay tuned for that as well. All right. Well, folks, I hate to say it because I've been having a great time with y'all today, but here we are at the very end of our EcoCast, and boy, has it been a fun one. Now, if you're thinking to yourself that this would be a good time that you'd like to come on and present and be a part of the Actual Tech Media webinar, megacast, EcoCast summit, DemoCast, PanelCast, boy, you name it, we've got it. We would love to have that conversation with you. Scott, myself, David, Keith, we would all love to talk to you on one of these live events. So please do reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com, and we will get that ball rolling. Well, with that, my friends, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank our speaker, our incredible speaker here today from Anaconda. What an interesting conversation, and really for making this EcoCast possible. Also to our keynote speaker, Philip Russum, absolutely info-packed day from start to finish here. On that note, a special thank you to all of you for attending, for asking some great questions. I've had so much fun chatting with you all today about data governance. I bet that was not something you thought was going to be so fun and interesting, and it really was. I think for some of us, we do our best to not think about some of these things. We just like them to be functioning quietly in the background. And it was really interesting to kind of bring a little bit more of that strategy, a little bit more of those interesting and layered puzzle piece approaches together in one place today and kind of dig into those a bit more. And that is absolutely my favorite thing about these EcoCasts, right? Because they give us a chance to come together, to share information, to share stories, ideas, learn about something that we hadn't known or didn't know we didn't know, and really connect and build that collaborative community of knowledge and information. So I appreciate all of you taking time out of your day to come be a part of that conversation today. I really enjoyed chatting with you all. Now, before you take off, before you run away, be sure that you have actually marked your calendar for tomorrow. That's April 12th. Wow, how is it midway through April already? When did that happen? So Wednesday, April 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, we have look at this jam-packed megacast we've got going on tomorrow. Building your ransomware preparedness plan. Oof, yep, that's a big one, folks. That's going to be a big conversation. And you know there's going to be, speaking of layered conversations, that's going to be full of layers. So building your ransomware preparedness plan, that's tomorrow, April 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. I hope that I will get to see all of you, every single one of you there tomorrow. And until I get to see you all again, have an absolutely beautiful end to your day.